Kalrsson Price for Tuesday, June 10th, 2025, coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the Historic Wall Center. In this program or presentation of Bet365. Matt Sekeres alongside guest co-host Patrick Johnston of the Province and Post Media, sitting in for Blake today. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches, conducting things. First of all, welcome. Thank you for sitting in.
Thanks. That's Mikey Rogerson.
Pray tell.
Young guy. Well, no, he was telling us that earlier. Remember? He's a young guy. Young man in the family.
He's young. Oh, okay.
He is.
News
Still
to me.
young at heart. Young at heart. Mikey Rogerson.
How are you enjoying that Wall Center coffee?
Excellent. Thank
Good.
you for very kind of you to get it for me. Mm-hmm. What hosting here?
Every day, go get coffee for the group.
What a guy. Leadership.
I'm not sure about that. It's my way of attending the scouting combine. More on that in a second. First, our Toyota Pacific Dealers poll question. How do you regard Brad Marchand? Rat? Playoff hero? Bit of both. You can vote. Sekeres Price, the X, and the YouTube channels. He's front and center again last night with the first goal of the hockey game. What says you?
Someone's got to stand up for Vancouver here, Matt. He will always be a rat in this town. Doesn't matter. I mean, obviously, he's an all-time great player. Absolute rat. Nothing will change that.
And that is my instinct, and that is how I have always perceived him. I can't get the visual of the low bridge on Sammy Salo in that Game 8 versus Boston all those years ago out of my head. And that, to me, was always sort of his signature moment. Now, I did not take as great offense to the sort of pantomiming, lifting the Stanley Cup at Rogers Arena, the kissing in the ring and all. To me, that was harmless, and him stepping into the wrestling heel, stoking the rivalry.
Yeah.
I was A-okay with that sort of stuff. But, intentionally trying to hurt somebody or just being so cowardly you can't take a body check in an NHL game, to me, that was a bridge too far. I will say, though, I find myself watching him in these playoffs for, of course, a new team in the Florida Panthers and going, man, what a winning hockey player.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, of course, he was that before. But, he is at the same. Look, many have said this for a long time. The type of guy that you hate to play against but love to have on your team. I would take issue with love to have on your team for a chunk of Brad Marchand's career, despite the fact he was a good hockey player. I just thought it was too much out there on the ice. But as he's gotten a little older, who knows wiser? In fact, he made some pretty interesting comments this week we'll get to with regards to tax-free jurisdictions. I do find myself not despising him as much as I used to despise him. So I voted a bit of both.
Do you really want me to read out what he said after he was suspended?
Which time?
The Salo one.
Okay, yes, please do.
It technically wasn't a clip, Marchand said.
Oh, God.
Clipping is when you hit someone at the knees, and I did not hit him at the knees. Anyone that has seen the video will see that I hit him in the upper thigh under the buttocks. They can call it clipping, but they obviously don't know the rules of hockey. I felt like I was trying to protect myself and get low, and he went over me. This was him in response to former head of player safety, Brendan Shanahan, who definitely played the game.
Well,
anyway,
have you seen that play before or since? It would be my question.
Yeah. Anyway, 13 years ago, still stands the test of time in this town.
It does. It does.
But yes, he is playing great in the Stanley Cup Final. 11 goals now in a Stanley Cup Final for Brad Marchand.
Yeah, 11 goals in his career in the Stanley Cup Final. It is tied for 20th all time. He is one back of a tie for 17th with three players, including former Leaf legend Teeter Kennedy. Tied for 25th all time now in playoff goals with 64. He is too shy of Denis Savard and Joe Nieuwendyk for 23rd, which he could quite easily get to in this Stanley Cup Final. We know at least 2 games remaining, probably more than that. So he is making his mark on the biggest stages. And, of course, he's a free agent this summer.
Could you imagine?
There's no way, right? You know what I'm going to ask, and there's no way?
I mean, Jimmy Rutherford has never been shy of
No, he hasn't.
doing that kind of thing. He wasn't here when all that happened.
Do you think
He just wants winners.
Like, could he possibly, like, this would be Hogan going NWO, if you will, the turn.
Brian Clough going to Leeds United. You know? Things like that.
Didn't think I'd get a Leeds United take out of the guy. But here we are. All right. Yeah, no, I was this close to going, do we do a poll question about whether or not Marchand is someone the Canucks should pursue in free agency? Yeah, we'll see. We have a few weeks left. The 2025 Toyota BZ4X, the 100% electric vehicle. You pass all the gas stations from now until eternity. You've got full access to the HOV lanes. You charge it at night. You wake up in the morning. It's good to go. Packed with all the things you want in an SUV. Cargo capacity fits friends, family, sports gear, pets. Can handle all the terrain here in Vancouver, from the city to the slopes. And when you choose the BZ4X, you can get $5,000 incentive. Now you can finance a BZ4X LE all-wheel drive from 0.99% APR for 36 months. Visit shoptoyota.ca, or better yet, visit your local Pacific Toyota dealer. Let's get to our top story. It is brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin skipped the NHL Scouting Combine this past week in Buffalo. Most of the top brass of clubs were in attendance to size up these prospects, interview them, begin getting their book on these future NHLers. Plus, and Darren Dreger mentioned this to us yesterday, start negotiating with other clubs or continue negotiating with other clubs on trades, not to mention feeling out agents in terms of what it's going to take to get their clients to sign in a few weeks' time. As we know, we're 2.5 weeks here from the draft. We are 3 weeks from the new league year. July 1st, Canada Day and free agency. Now, Assistant General Manager Cami Granato and the Head of Director of Amateur Scouting, Todd Harvey, were in attendance for the Vancouver Canucks, as well as with amateur scouts. But does Rutherford and Allvin's absence mean something? Does that mean they are trading the 15th overall pick, that they're not going to get too deeply invested in some of these kids because they intend, or they already have a deal to move that 15th overall first-round selection out?
In a normal year, I might not scratch my head as much, but as we'll get into with both Cam Robinson and John Shannon, I'm sure, there is the question of the draft being decentralized this year and not getting to walk the floor the way you normally do. And the thing to understand, if you've been to a draft, I mean, you've worked many drafts. I've worked a couple. But it is the NHL's annual conference.
Yeah.
It is the get-together where everything gets discussed. Now, of course, these guys have each other's phone numbers and they're talking all the time and on and on and on. But it is also just that sense of it is a chance to gather intelligence, to understand what other teams are thinking about your own players, think about other teams' players. What's the gossip? How can I get at this? It's, you can get at everything a little bit quicker at a draft. There is not that environment this year. This is the next closest thing. So from that standpoint, I wouldn't expect maybe Jim Rutherford to be there, but Patrick Allvin not being there. I mean, here is the super scout, right? Like, he is the actual super scout. They've done pretty well with him in charge of their drafting. And so it just struck me as a little bit odd that this year for him not to be there.
Ditto.
They, as you said, they have people there. It's not like they were absent, and they have people there doing their jobs. The boss man, it's just strange that the boss is not.
Yeah, I thought it a little strange as well. They also haven't been at the Abbey games recently, although they were earlier in the postseason run. Patrick, are they all in on a practice facility right now?
Could you imagine? We talked about this. I mean, I did talk about this in conversation last week. Did you?
Yeah, we did not talk on the Sickerson Price hit, and I regretted that. Blake said to me, "Why didn't we ask him about?"
I mean,
but Rosemary.
but quickly, like the Rosemary Brown thing. I mean, I think it's close enough to the airport in comparison with UBC that there's some logic there, but it's still for players who live in like Kits, it's an hour drive at best.
Is it an hour?
It'll take a while
On a weekday morning? It's an hour out there?
It's a lot of red lights.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my point.
Yeah.
Listen, maybe you get
but,
there. But anyway,
can I ask this question again? And I know you've poo-pooed me, but like, are you not at the beggars can't be choosers here? Like, there are other teams that have practice facilities quite distant from downtown in their NHL arena. Like,
and as many teams or people noted, Gary Bettman last night on TV.
That's right.
Goes and says, I don't think taxes are as important.
He called it ridiculous. He went after Biz Nasty, said it was ridiculous, and said that maybe if all other things are equal, it makes the case, but he listed a lot of reasons why players side, and he included a first class practice facility.
So, the Canucks stand out. You're right. Beggars can't be choosers. There are things in front of them that could be probably turned around pretty quick. Obviously, this is an option in that regard because there are options, I think, involving the building itself that's already there. But clearly, I think their interest is probably, Britannia is a much more complicated beast, even if it is in many ways an ideal location.
Yeah, for sure.
But as a project, it's a very, I'm going to write some more about this, but it's because it's a bigger picture than just the Canucks. It's a very stalled out project, and I won't bore everyone with the details, but it's a project that's been identified for a long time.
Why aren't they getting together with the PWHL team? Out at the PNE in the Agrido, that's
the moment that emerged that was happening. I thought, oh man, the politics behind this, I can't even wait to find out and I don't, because we know the Canucks did talk to the PNE at one point before they moved on with Abbotsford, right? Like that was a consideration. The PNE had it basically said, we will put in a new scoreboard. We know we need to do a bunch of renos here anyway. It's in their budget anyway. So that was sitting there as a possibility. I think the thing that sold in the end was that the Aquilini Group got the management contract for the Abbotsford Center, so they were never going to get that for
which
the
is
PNE.
the deal they wanted the first time around, and basically Abbotsford Center didn't have a lot of options after building a facility for the Flames farm team and losing scads of money. There was also news yesterday. Blake was mentioning this, that the Tsleil-Waututh Nation may be looking at taking over the Hastings.
Yeah, they've got a deal. We're still trying to. Steve Ewan, my colleague, I think, and Dan Fumana, my colleagues, called them up about this. Talked to Jen Thomas, the leader of Tsleil-Waututh over there, basically saying, "Well, what about the stadium idea? Because the lease,
this would be the Whitecaps soccer facility.
So the race course lease for the racing outfit is up next year, and everyone assumes it's over.
Well, the city has called it a sunset industry.
As fun as it's been there for 130 years.
And I was there a couple of weeks ago. The size of the fields has gone down a fair bit, especially since Glenn Todd.
And there's a large sort of it's a large piece of land. Anyway, so Tsleil-Waututh are basically buying that portion. What they're going to do with it is not clear.
Yeah.
But there's a casino. There's going to be a casino.
Well, there's a casino there now. I mean, it's pretty small. It's kind of tucked away.
But there's a license there. There's a business there that matters. Anyway, so there's something that's going to happen there.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will be involving winter sports, I think is what I'm going to say, Matthew.
Oh.
Well, I think if it's a stadium, it will be it will be a soccer.
Right.
Football kind of stadium.
The other question I had was, is there enough room there to just drop a stadium where Hastings Racecourse is now and not affect those adjacent soccer fields? Because I see a lot of activity on those.
There's tons of space.
There's tons. Racetracks are bigger
than
you think they are. They're
it is
very
definitely a large
space.
I wrote a column about this a couple of weeks ago a month ago after they announced the PWHL team. And talk to some people, and there are plans already in motion. Like they are trying to make it more green, like green space. There's a creek they're basically reestablishing. Like the instinct is to not necessarily. I don't think the instinct is to build an ice rink. I guess is what I'm
Right. I'm just talking about the Canucks getting together on the Agrodome side of things for a training
you could
facility.
certainly upgrade the Agrodome. They're already doing some work in there anyway. What it actually means, I don't know. But
Well,
no, you're not
especially if
wrong.
you have
You're not wrong.
partners, I would like to think that that's a cheaper option and a more sort of bringing more utility than having to build your own.
The one that's obvious to me, and I've written about this before. You look at UBC; there's already in their plan. They would love to build a third sheet of ice or fourth sheet of ice in that surface level parking lot that's between the rink, the Father Bauer rink, and the old Osborne gym, which is the tennis center and all that. Like, there's space to build it there, but that obviously has gotten nowhere because we haven't. There would be an announcement about something like that. They clearly like UBC. Like, the location is good. It's obviously near where the president and the general manager live. A lot of the players live over that way.
Kits, Dunbar, Yaletown.
It's easy to get to.
Yeah.
And it would, there has not been a new sheet of ice put into the city of Vancouver in 50 years.
Oh my God.
So it would look good. It would look good on.
As for the scouting combine, it could just also be pure delegation on the part of Rutherford and Allvin, or it could be telling. Canucks did put out a video featuring Todd Harvey where he talks about it's time to dig in and get deeper with all these prospects. The Canucks took Braden Coots, a centerman from the Seattle Thunderbirds, out to dinner. We still awaiting word on what other prospects they may have spent more individual time with at the combine. Grab your tickets for this year's Cheer by the Pier event, June 14th, put on by Family Services of the North Shore. Proceeds from this event go directly to their child and youth mental health program. Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, several other craft beverage companies will be sampling for the evening. This is June 14th, Cheer by the Pier. Stanley Cup Final devolves in Game 3. Had the makings of an all-time classic and could still be that, but big step backwards last night, both in competitiveness and aesthetic. Fugly on the scoreboard. Refs insert themselves into the first period, calling 8 minor penalties. You had a punch-up late. You had Jake Walman embarrassing himself with childish antics, and you have a Colin Campbell matter rearing its head, and we know how that goes. Okay, where do you want to start here?
I was just laughing a bit about us being outraged at how many penalties got called because
it wasn't the case in
no, I was
in Boston.
I will just say for reasons that will soon become clear.
Okay,
I was reviewing Dan Maruelli's 19 minor penalties he called in Game 3 between the Canucks and Kings in 1991. So 8 just seems quaint.
Well, it's just and like the Evander Kane cross-check, which I thought was a Forsling sold pretty. I was like, really? We're calling that in the first period?
I think that to me was a message. They're just looking at a guy who I think they probably the 2 minute
a message 40, to Evander or to everybody?
I think probably to the player. I mean, 2:45 skating around, hyping up, trying to draw attention. I mean, that was I saw that. I'm like,
but nobody signs up for the ref show here.
No,
right? Like parades to the penalty box, especially in a first period of a Stanley Cup game, coming off the 2 classics you just had. It was just such a.
I'm sorry, are we blaming the refs
error out of the balloon? No.
How about the Oilers playing defense and not giving up so many breakaways and giving their goalie a chance?
I just want to get to this though because it is germane to the Vancouver Canucks and everybody who remembers 2011 and the Cup Final. But the tweet came out from the Two Mutts podcast over in Alberta, where they said Florida management has addressed what they're calling an NBA-style pick or interference play by Evan Bouchard to Colin Campbell in the NHL. And for those of you on YouTube, do we have the video there, Mike? For those of you on YouTube, you can watch and see that Bouchard sort of skates over and gets in the way as a Oilers player is skating up the ice with the puck, which creates his own entry and ultimately created a goal. Apparently, Florida, according to Two Mutts podcast, were some upset that this wasn't called, thought they could be up 2-0 in this series if it was called. Of course, Gregory Campbell works for the Florida Panthers. I mean, maybe they have I hope they have the reporting right here, but I sure hope that Colin Campbell has zero influence on this series whatsoever. He put it in an email. He's a venting hockey dad who leaned on referees in his charge on behalf of his son once upon a time. Like that he's still employed in the NHL office is mind-boggling. Like conflict of interest much? Anyways.
He's a Hockey Hall of Famer, Matt.
Oh, my God. Don't get me fucking started. Like, anyways, 2 months goes on and says there was a similar play in a Tampa-Toronto series of Game 7 where Justin Holl was called for interfering with Stamkos off a Tavares goal. Wes McCauley, the referee who called that play. Wes was the referee in Game 1. Anyways, we'll see where that goes, if anywhere. But 140 combined penalty minutes in Game 3 were the fourth most in Stanley Cup final history, the most since 1986, and all but 18 minutes were in a dumpster dive third period. Edmonton defenseman Jake Walman squirts water towards the Florida bench, the shrapnel hitting a ticked-off Brian Boucher, broadcasting between the benches. Walman fined for roughing and unsportsmanlike conduct today. Then in the post game, Walman, who has been very good for them, and I gotta say, San Jose stole him from Detroit. Like, if you're a Red Wings fan, I'm sorry, Steve Yzerman paid to get this guy off the team. He's a good player.
I think it's an under-discussed pickup of the Oilers.
Yeah, it is.
They've
really
built a
is.
nice set of forwards, and he's one of the reasons why.
Well, the other thing that we discussed last week, Patrick, is Edmonton did not go out and get the Redwoods in defense. They went out and got more puck-moving guys, Klingberg and Walman. And so far, I think you can say they've looked better in this postseason than they did last postseason, certainly since being down early in that LA series.
I said forwards obviously meant defense.
Yeah, that's fair.
Thinking forwards.
Walman in the postgame, quote, it's for the Stanley Cup, so fuck. There's not an inch out there. It's a grown man's game out there. It's not for the faint of heart. Guys are putting everything on the line, It's a grown man's game. From the guy squirting water at other grown men.
No, we don't squirt. I'm just using my dad. No, we don't squirt water at our friends.
Yeah, honestly. And look, I had very high hopes for this series. I still do. I still think it can get back on the rails. But does this style of game favor Florida? And is that something they're going to intend to go out and play here in what's left of this final?
Well, it's certainly, it was the Oilers losing focus on what they need to be doing, which is come back. Obviously, they hadn't played very well in the game to begin with.
No.
But if this, if they're going to get knocked off, they need to get focused and not get caught up in shenanigans. And I think if the Panthers, the Panthers need to obviously take care of business and keep pressing. But you are looking at an Oilers team that is now on very, very thin ice.
The goaltending situation has reared its head again, and Coach Knobloch today saying he's not going to announce his starter just yet for Game 4. We have another 2-day break here, everybody, so it's Thursday for Game 4 in Florida. The first two games were so aesthetically pleasing, and both these teams, when they do want to play with the puck and play offensive puck possession, up and down hockey, can put on an absolutely beautiful show. We've talked about this going into the series and after the first couple of games. If you're a hockey fan and you're a neutral, this is just about as appealing a Stanley Cup final as we've had recently. So I hope it continues that way. I hope that Game 3 is the outlier, because at 4-1 after 2, Patrick, I sort of pep talked myself and said, you know what? That's a really good offensive team. Two of the best offensive players in the world. This thing maybe isn't over. I'm going to watch and, hope to see some dramatics, and then that beautiful power play goal from Florida to make it 5-1. And boy, that was gorgeous. I'll give them that. And next thing you know, the game's done and we're off to the punch-up.
I'm just thinking of how just impressive the Panthers were last year winning the Stanley Cup, how impressive they've been putting this all together for, version 2.0.
Yes,
and
for sure.
And you
Zito
going
deserves
into
so much credit.
like, so much credit, and going into the
Murray's too.
season or going into the final, I was just like, no, this is Florida's series to lose. Like they just,
Did you pick Florida?
Yeah, I get the appeal of the Oilers in terms of the offense and the power play and all that, and what they've done. I mean, they are going to show themselves up to be one of the top 2 teams in the league fundamentally.
Yeah. Well, I think these are the
but
two
these
best.
Panthers, these Panthers are just such another level in terms of their relentlessness. That all ice press that they're able to put in
for sure,
is so impressive, and the defensive sort of smarts they show. It's the difference. The all around.
I
game
almost
is
wonder
just
whether
the next level.
Barkov steered him into the official last night, knowing there was a chance that the official could get in the way on that one. The other thing is, I watched Lundell and Luosterainen, and I go, "Wow, like these guys are so underrated in terms of their compete level. They're just everywhere, smothering." Anyways, we'll see about Game 4 Thursday. Patrick, how about William Karlsson as a 2C target for the Vancouver Canucks, the Vegas Golden Knights forward, and of course the hero of their expansion year, 40 goals. They got to the Stanley Cup Final, so he's been there from the jump. But the word is he may shake free now as Vegas looks to redeploy some of its cap space on bigger names, be that Mitch Marner or some others. 32 years old, a 6-foot, 190-pound left shot, $5.9 million with 2 years left on a 10-team no-trade list. Was down to 29 points this year, but in 53 games, there was a lot missed there. He was 60 in 70 the year before. What do you think?
I saw his name pop up, I guess yesterday, and I went, I don't know. He's had a solid career in Vegas. There's just nothing in him that tells
Cup
me.
winner? Right?
Yeah, Cup winner. That's fine. Like he had a good season last year. He had a tough season this year. He's just a guy that strikes me as okay. If there's
Not quite elite enough.
not well, I just want to think they can do better. I just think there are other names out there, that are gettable or less gettable. I don't know, but there are other names out there. I just would find them more interesting. You look at like say Morgan Geekie or somebody like that. Like there's just Marco Rossi. Like the age for me more than anything is what sticks out. And he's just going in the wrong direction. He was fine this year when he played, but I think the player's in decline. And I'm sure I'll be wrong about this because the moment you say things like that,
He does have a tendency to be up and down. So if he has a huge bounce back season,
listen. I get the idea. You could do worse. I just think you could do.
So what I would say is I think you're right in terms of targets. Is he at the top of your wish list? No. But in terms of cost, because, of course, some of the targets at the top of your list are going to cost a pretty penny. I mean, we've already heard how competitive it's going to be for that top 2 center with so many teams looking for that profile, including teams that view themselves as contender or need to get over the hump, Winnipeg being one, that have a variety of assets they can put together in a package, whereas Karlsson looks like he might be more of a salary cap dump, and so can you get him a little cheaper on the trade cost, and does that just make more sense to you going forward?
I mean, if you're going, that's the Billy Bean approach, right? If this is the money rebuild them in the aggregate. We're not going to get JT Miller, but how do we get a couple guys that do a lot of stuff that he does? And they certainly they need a new winger. We know that they need at least another winger. Yeah. So if you're building it that way,
he's likely not to cost you Wielander. He's likely not to cost you Lekkerimäki. He's likely not to cost you one of your young roster defensemen. Yeah. So we'll see where that goes. You mentioned the commissioner on TNT and given Bisnasty the business about his tax-free jurisdiction comments. Brad Marchand did an interview earlier in this final where he laid it out as he saw it. Quote, there are teams where that absolutely matters. It doesn't matter for every player, but when you're dealing with guys that have a choice between multiple teams, it absolutely plays a part. If you have 2 teams that are offering the same contract, you're going to pick the team with less tax. And then when he went on and said most contending teams don't have a lot of cap space, when you look at Canadian teams, most of them have an extremely high tax rate. Then the California teams, same thing. So those teams are going to have to pay more money to get certain players than others, much to Gary's chagrin, who has said that there will be no action on equalizing tax jurisdictions in this new CBA. And usually Gary knows he has the votes, right?
Yeah.
Usually when Gary says that, it's because he knows he's got the backing of enough governors to head off any kind of dissent, if there is dissent at the governor's table. But I like this from Rachel Dory, former Canucks employee. The league needs tax-free markets to succeed or they're irrelevant in their cities. And it's fair. If the Florida Panthers aren't winning hockey games, we saw how dreadful, how minor league it looked down there, right? Tampa is a better market, I think, than South Florida. But look, if Tampa becomes irrelevant in the NHL standings, what is their rink going to look like? Nashville, Seattle, Dallas, Vegas. These are all non-traditional hockey markets, right? Where if you don't have a contending team, they are very interesting. They are very easily ignored in what are, in some cases, extremely busy sports markets. I mean, getting into the sports conversation in Dallas is some feat when you think of everything they cover and everything that matters. So Rachel goes on and says, if I'm Toronto, Montreal, New York Rangers owners, I'd be saying, Gary addressed it, or we're going to push back against revenue sharing.
Yeah.
Which would be quite an option to drop.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I found myself wondering, there's only 6 of these tax-free jurisdictions. You've got theoretically 26 teams that could align and take a very well-supported position in all of this with something like revenue sharing or even without. This is going to be Gary's last CBA. Are there some governors who may grow some plums here and say, finally, it's time to stand up to Gary on something? We don't like the way the commissioner is leading us down this particular issue. He's not going to be around. I don't have to be as scared of him as I have been in the past.
It's been such Gary's league, it's hard to imagine.
Well, I know.
And everyone's towed the line in the end.
There's, again, 26 teams that could feel competitively disadvantaged by this.
Yeah, I get it. I mean,
I'm just wondering if there's a world where that could exist. I guess I'm hoping for it because I do think this does need to be addressed. And frankly, I'd love to see Gary knocked off his perch on something CBA. Something where, the markets, the governors get together and say, you know what? No, Gary. You may look at it and understand it in a certain way, but we're looking at it as on July 1st, we have agents coming to us and saying, oh, by the way, Florida's offered $8.3 million. So if you're going to be in the bidding based on the tax situation in your jurisdiction, you're going to need to go to 10 plus.
Yeah.
It is a factor on July 1st.
There is an analysis that's gone around, and I don't know where it came from, but I would like to find out where it was. But somebody basically broke down the sort of true cap, if you will, if you incorporate local taxes.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
And it's like a $15 million difference between the four most sort of taxed Canadian teams: the Canucks, Habs, Leafs, and Senators, and the Panthers, Knights, Predators, Stars.
So that's
Kraken,
extracting like 15-20% value out of the cap, right?
It comes down to do you deploy it effectively? And certainly Bill Zito has become quite good at that. I would say Dale Talon was not doing a good job. That's the other thing to understand here. I mentioned this last week. We're only talking about this because the Panthers got their shit together.
That's right. It's not a magic bullet. Nobody is arguing that it is a magic bullet. I mean, hell, Minnesota has been competitive, hanging on to $15 million of dead money with Suter and Parisi.
Yeah.
And
I would say the other.
But it is also, like, two things can be true at the same time. It is also an advantage on July 1st. That much is clear.
And, I think the other counter, and I think I raised this the other week, but the Oilers playing, even in Canadian terms, relative terms, obviously in Canadian terms, a lower tax environment, but in North American terms, a high tax environment, and they're in the Stanley Cup Final. The team that won the President's Trophy was the Winnipeg Jets. They pay a lot, and it's not necessarily a desirable place to live. Apologies to all the Winnipeg Jets fans we have here.
Yeah. Patrick, I covered an Ottawa Senators team that was heading to bankruptcy and won a President's Trophy.
So
that was the folly before the 04-05 lockout. Gary's running around telling everyone we need this for competitive balance. To the better teams in the league were Ottawa and Buffalo.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is obviously the degree of difficulty is less in those places.
For sure.
But
you can make a compelling argument to that free agent that other jurisdictions can't make.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll see. Because the other thing is there were some blue sky people who thought that the CBA might be done by this point, right? That we would have that the union with Marty Walsh now and the league is getting along so famously.
Yeah.
That we would have complete labor peace well in advance of the expiration. And look, if we get to September, we're in a 1-year countdown, right? Yeah. And that can be pretty ominous for hockey fans, and particularly hockey fans who are familiar with this commissioner, his tactics, and the fact that they have locked the players out on several occasions.
Yeah. Certainly coming to the year, I was very cynical about the situation, and I was fully convinced there was going to be a lockout, partly because I didn't think they would get the massive TV deal that they got out of nowhere.
Right. And the other thing to monitor on this file is these cap jumps are going to be so extreme in the next couple of years. Do you have some of the smaller revenue markets looking around going, holy cow, I'm not sure we're going to be able to compete with this in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right? Which, of course, would throw everything that they argued going in 04-05 about competitiveness out the window if that's the case. You would have and have-nots, teams that just cannot, under even the best of circumstances, financially compete to the upper level of the cap, whereas other teams are going to do so happily. That was an imbalance argument they made to us, Gary and the owners, 20 years ago. We'll see if it still applies this time around. Lastly, Patrick, in your I knew vaguely of this, but you know more of the details than I. Cheech is finally getting his assist.
Yes. Well, apparently.
Tell the story.
Well, so Ron McLean reported on Friday that, yes, if you go back to April 9th, 1980, the last game played by one Gordie Howe, the last goal scored in an 8-4 win for the Habs over the lamented Hartford Whalers.
I was going to say Hartford.
Gordie Howe scored his last goal, his only game of the 3-game preliminary round, as they used to do. 1 versus 16. The Habs, I was talking to Cheech about this earlier.
Goodness.
The Habs were first overall in the NHL. The Whalers were 16th overall in the NHL. Mm-hmm. Cheech pointed out they were 7 games under 500. Habs were 27 games over. It was an incredible mismatch. And in the third period,
this is the 79-80 Canadians?
79-80 Canadians.
Okay.
So who lose to the Islanders, right? Like the Islanders end up winning the Stanley Cup.
That's right. To begin their dynasty.
Yes. So it's a big year. It's the first post WHA year. Like it's a threshold year in so many terms, in so many ways. Anyway, Gordie's last goal, currently credited, only 1 assist, Mark Howe, his son. Mm-hmm. But if you go and watch the replay, it is clear that if you go on the standards of now, and as far as I know then, John Garrett deserved the second assist. He clearly makes a pass to Mark Howe, who brings the puck up the ice and gives it to his dad, and his dad scores. And for many, many years, it's been repeated up and down, various places. I, in fact, made inquiries during the season this year. Are you guys going to? Didn't hear back. Mm-hmm. But yes, it appears that he is going to be credited, or at least that's what Ron McLean has said. So I'm trying to follow up on this. But that, yes, John Garrett will get his long overdue assist.
To say the least, long overdue.
45 euros overdue.
Assist.
Credit to the great John Garrett.
So that would be, if I have this correct, and bookkeeping was not quite as dutiful back then, was that his only NHL assist? I see 1 in the WHA.
For Cheech?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that's also correct. You're right. Yes, I'd forgotten. Goalies.
No, hold on. Now I'm finding more assists.
No, you were looking at the playoff.
I have 3 assists for. Oh wait. Oh my gosh, Cheech, 6 assists.
Yeah,
this would be 7.
Well, but it would be his only playoff assist in the NHL. How about that?
Got you.
So yeah, he had 1 assist in the 75 WHA playoffs for, as John will point out to you, the Minnesota Fighting Saints, the greatest team that ever folded.
Against a 4-time defending Stanley Cup champion Montreal Canadiens team. Lafleur, Schutt, Robinson, Tremblay, Langway, Gainey, Lapointe, Jarvis. Yeah, pretty good team.
What a life. What a career.
And Mr. Hockey. All right, let's get to our menu. It's brought to you by Greta, a fantastic spot to watch all the games home and away, but an even better spot for your summer sociable. If you're looking at booking a team building event, a party, check out Greta. It's got the fantastic arcade. It will be loads of fun for all your guests, and they have such a wide variety of games. Some of them are driving games. They got air hockey. They have all your big franchises, video game-wise, Pop-A-Shot, absolutely spectacular. Fun for everyone, plus the incredible menu there, the street food theme. For more info, to book your event, go to gretabar.com. Greta, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin. Cam Robinson is going to join us from Elite Prospects. He was at the Scouting Combine. More on the Canucks' absence there. And John Shannon's going to join us as we talk more about the Stanley Cup Final, and including whether the league likes it when you have all the fireworks and fisticuffs that you saw last night in Game 3. That's all coming up on the show. Time now for our Bet365 Bets of the Day. The segment proudly brought to you by Bet365. Patrick, you're a guest here, so by all means, you have the honor.
Yes. I often say this is why I don't bet, but this one stood out to me. I might even put money down on this.
I really like this one.
Canadian Grand Prix this week, Matthew. Big week out in Montreal. Last time it will be in June.
That's right.
Announced today it's moving to the May long weekend.
And same weekend as the Indy 500, which some motorsport fans are not happy about because they attend both.
But could you imagine a Habs playoff run coinciding? What a weekend in Montreal that would be.
Oh, my God.
Anyway.
Grand Prix, if you don't know, it's like the Grey Cup on steroids. It shuts down your city. It's the single biggest sporting event in Canada every year. 120,000 plus people are on site at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in the man-made island in the basin of the St. Lawrence, and it attracts people from all over the world. But there's usually huge numbers of American and Mexican F1 fans who come up for it.
So what stood out to me was you look at Shirley, who the race favorite is, and I think Oscar Piastri. If I say that, he is the race $225 to win.
Yeah, that's great value.
Great value
on the guy's been the best driver on the best team so far in season 2025.
$275 for Lando, but $225 Oscar Piastri. Hard to beat that.
Prior to qualifying, you can get some pretty good odds there because qualifies on the front row, pole position. You're not getting that value. I'm looking at this Canada Ivory Coast soccer friendly tonight from Toronto. And look, they're calling it the Canadian Shield, and it's a virtual tournament.
It's a warm-up.
But it's not a round robin. Not everyone's there. It's not like it's a medal round or anything like that. It's just everyone.
Well, they put it together for Blake.
Yeah, well,
it's just all for Blake.
They want to see how Blake does calling games on TSN. So Canada has a win in the bank over Ukraine already. And look, these are tests more than they are must-wins. So perhaps not the A lineup from Jesse Marsh tonight, or perhaps not all the best subs. Anyways, I'm going to just take a shot on the draw. It's at plus 250, Canada and Ivory Coast this evening from BMO. Our friends at Bet365, you want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs? They got you. Game props, player props, totals, money line, even bet futures, series winner, Conn Smythe winner, whatever your bet. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Cam Robinson coming up next. a Kalrsson Price from the historic Wall Center. Nice hat.
Yeah, it's a sponsor, I believe.
Guy walks into the studio and says, I'm going to steal this hat. And he picks the Bogey Juice one because, they got nice swag.
Yeah,
nice logo. Great colors. And if you're not familiar with Bogey Juice, you really should be. Because if you're a golfer, hey, you're going to make some bogeys. So get on home and drown your sorrows in some Bogey Juice, a tantalizing blend of crisp apple, flavoring, kicking ginger, refreshing zing, top shelf vodka. It's guaranteed to make your golf buddies beam with envy, despite the score it refers to. Get yourself to bogeyjuice.com, and you can use code SP15 for 15% off Bogey Juice product and merch. As we welcome in Cam Robinson, the Director of Content and Film Scouting for Elite Prospects, and a huge thank you to Elite Prospects and Patrick Korn, because I woke up this morning to my 2025 Elite Prospects Draft Guide via email at a mere 1,800 pages, Cam.
Keeping it short, keeping it brief this year for you. Yeah, you're on that illustrious influencer list that I put together, so you get a free copy there. Spread that around a little bit.
You've really outdone yourself. I mean, War and Peace is jealous of the length you guys put together this year. Holy cow, the deep dive.
Yes, we feel like we've maybe got to the point now where we're above some NHL teams' depth that they go into.
Yeah, you mentioned last week.
And we've heard from teams the same thing. Like, we don't get those type of reports from some of our guys, so that does feel good.
Hey, I annually get the Baseball America Prospect Handbook. Now, I think it's only like 300-400 pages, Cam. But one of the testimonials on the back, and it's true, I've asked this around, every MLB GM has a copy of this book in their office just as a quick reference guide anytime a prospect comes up in trade negotiations. And I have a feeling the EP Ringside Draft Guide is the same for NHL general managers as they're preparing for the draft. Speaking of, you were at the Combine in Buffalo this past weekend.
Yeah.
Dundee S, Jim Rutherford, and Patrick Allvin. Where were they?
Where were they indeed? I guess looking for practice facilities, in Surrey or East Van or something like that. No, it was noteworthy. I got in on Wednesday. A lot of the teams get in on Sunday or Monday. And so, by the time I get there on Wednesday, some guys had already left. And so I was like, maybe they were here and gone. And so I checked around and no, they weren't there. Cami Granato was there. Todd Harvey was there. I know they took Braden Coots out for dinner, with some of the scouts, but no Patrick Allvin, no Jim Rutherford. Definitely was an anomaly compared to the vast majority of organizations who did have their GM as well as their director of scouting and often a couple of assistant GMs there and player personnel. They had all sorts, some teams had 20 plus guys there. So people there. So it was definitely noteworthy, and it's telling with how they are valuing this pick coming up here, the 15th overall pick. To me, it's a pretty straight line to get to that they're probably going to trade it if they're not that interested in sitting down with these players. But at the same time, this was the last opportunity to be face-to-face with all the other executives, right? They were all in the Marriott together. They spent a week in the hotel in the lobby and, chit-chatting, and, we're all watching the games together at the pub downstairs, and, that opportunity. And guys were, even at the Combine when they're watching testing, it was kind of like the draft floor a little bit where you're watching, here's one executive walking in over and they're, they're exchanging banter or whatever, friendly conversation, but rumors were swirling. Guys were trying to get, the groundwork laid for some potential deals. And so you think that even if you weren't going to hold on to that pick, you'd want to be in the same room to discuss potential moves to get rid of that pick and to help bolster your team in the near term.
Unless, of course, you already have a trade lined up and it just doesn't matter, I suppose.
I suppose. But if,
I guess some news for us, Patrick?
No, I mean,
really,
that's one of the logic points. That is that they must have a deal on the table and they're waiting for the end of the call. I mean, whether that's true or not, it still seems very odd to me.
Yeah.
Because even if you don't have a huge crew, because you don't need a huge crew, you can do whatever you want. It just, as you said, Cam, it's very strange just from a sort of an intelligence gathering standpoint. Can you just give us a sense of like what kind of team or what teams maybe otherwise wouldn't have had their GM there? I mean, as you said, it's not like every guy's there, but most of them are. Is it just like the two teams in the Stanley Cup Final GMs aren't there, or who else might not be there?
Well, obviously they weren't there. I didn't, some teams that didn't have a first round pick. I didn't know that, I didn't see Vegas's GM.
Okay.
So, and those make sense, right? And same with like Vegas didn't take anybody out for dinner. It's like, yeah, well, we're not picking until day 2, and you just kind of let things happen. But like you said, an information gathering standpoint, it's very strange because some teams, and I fully asked them this, like, why did you interview this player? Why did you ask to have extra time with this player when they're not in your range? Like James Hagan sat down with 16 teams. It's like, yeah, good luck, right? But this is an opportunity for these teams to get to know this player a little bit better for the future, right? That information doesn't just go away in 2 weeks. You can have that in 2 years and 4 years when trade opportunities and signing opportunities happen. You want to have a book on these guys. Where did they start? Where are they at now? And so it just, the more information, the better, as far as I'm concerned, and just open up all avenues to try to find somewhere where you can get an advantage on another team.
Well, and it goes beyond that because Dreger joined the show yesterday and said somebody told him the combine in Buffalo is being referred to in some circles as Tamperfest because that's where you get to start talking to the agents, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, about the pending UFAs that are coming up. Because there's a big agent contingent there too, is there not, Cam?
Oh, absolutely, right? Like it's kind of like the meeting of the minds, right? Like the draft is always, it's like our winter meetings. We don't have that like baseball does, where everyone comes together for the draft. But the combine now, especially with the decentralized draft, became even more important for that regard. So yes, agents, all the reps were there, the advisors, whatever you want to call them, if the kids are in school, the execs, the scouts, the media, like everybody's mitching and matching, and yeah, loads of stuff coming out of there for sure. Like nothing concrete, nothing's done yet, but you can get to the point where it's like, yes, this player is definitely on the block, like a guy like Keandre Miller, right? Word around there is that Jonathan Taves, everybody's very interested. It really sounds like he's going to end up in Winnipeg. Like without it being done, it's like all signs kind of point to this. And even guys that are still playing, like a Sam Bennett, was a hot topic of discussion among teams and among agents and among the media about what's he looking at getting on the open market. What is Florida maybe interested in offering to retain him? Is he interested in playing in a Canadian team or for a Canadian team? I'm told no. So lots of juicy little nuggets coming out of there.
You said the Canucks took Seattle Thunderbird centerman Braden Coots out for dinner. Do you know who else the Canucks spent time with?
That was the only one that I got confirmed that they requested and spent additional time with. Yeah, it was Coots. Okay, you ranked him. EP ranks him 16th in the final ranking, so right there in the Canucks neighborhood. Any center iceman, give us the profile. What kind of player is he? Yeah, really is a pacey kid, really pushes the pace. He has good skating. Not the biggest guy, but he does like to get in and cause some disruption on the forecheck. He's intelligent. I'd say that he can flash some really high-end skill at times, but overall, I would say he's more likened to a player that you're going to envision playing in the middle of your lineup, the middle six center, maybe has to ship over to the wing because of his size. But, like a heady, intelligent guy who kind of maximizes the tools that he has to get the most out of him. I like him, and a good kid as well too. Someone who's a competitor and looking to get better and has leadership qualities as well.
Can I ask you about one more prospect in his ranking on the EP list?
Yeah,
I gotta say, I was stunned to see Swedish forward Anton Frondell down at number 13. I've seen him as high as number 3 on some other lists. So what are the holes we're picking apart? And do you think there's any world where he would be available at 15 or even available 10 to 15 where the Canucks might be able to jump up and get him?
No, he will not be available at that part of the draft. And so, if you've been following our work all year, it's that we've been a little bit lower on Anton Frondell than the vast majority of public lists. But we are in line with several NHL teams that I've spoken to that do agree with where now that's not to say that all of them do, because there are a couple teams out there that have him as like the number 2 prospect in the draft and potentially the number 1 forward. So it's a discrepancy on the upside. So he's already a well-developed individual at 6'1", 205 already. Not a shredded 205, but he did perform very, very well in the aerobic fitness testing there. Like he was top in the VO2 max. He did really well in the Wingate, which is great. It shows that maybe there is another level of fitness for him coming to maturation in that regard. But it's, he's a north-south player. He plays a heavy game. He has a really good shot, but the creativity, the high-end skill, the consistency over time, it's given us pause. My personal rankings will probably have him a little bit higher than that 13th overall, but it won't be pushing up into that 3 to 5 range that some lists have him. But I will say is that, I talked to some people that he trains with in the summertime, and boy, oh boy, do they speak highly of this kid and his work ethic. And so that can often trump natural gifted skill in the long run too. So you don't want to bet against this kid, I'd say.
Well, looking forward to the draft here in a couple of weeks, and particularly if the Canucks do keep that 15th overall pick. But many suspect, including this one here, that it might already be packaged somewhere for that second line centerman or top two center that they're looking for. A new name has emerged here in the last week. William Karlsson, the Vegas expansion hero once upon a time. You may remember 40 goals out of the chute for the expansion Golden Knights. The theory being that, Vegas may well, again, be big game hunting here and need to clear some cap space. William Karlsson, what do you make of the player? What do you make of the fit? Would he be what the Vancouver Canucks need, Cam?
Need? I don't know about that. 32 years old. He's got 2 years at just a hair under $6 million per, right? He's one of the streakiest guys in the league. Like he either scores at like 18 or 20%, or he scores at like 6 or 7%, depending on the year. You'd probably get him reasonably cheap just because of, as you mentioned, is that they're looking to free up some space to go after, a Mitch Marner or someone like that. I don't hate it. I don't love it. He's coming off a 29-point season. It doesn't exactly scream upgrade for the team.
No.
I as a fallback option, maybe, but it definitely wouldn't be the number one pick for me if I was looking to bolster that 2C spot.
So you think his days as a 2C are behind him, or will soon be behind him?
I mean, I guess if you can catch him on one of his streaky years, he could go out and score 30 goals and 55 points for you. But it's like it's a big bet at his age to expect that moving forward.
What about the Boston centermen, Pavel Zacha and Morgan Geekie? Geekie is a RFA. Zacha is under contract for a couple more years at just under $5 million. We had heard Zacha tied to the Vancouver Canucks a couple of years ago when he was making his way from Jersey. What do you make of those two Boston centermen?
Yeah, Zach is interesting. He's good in the dot. He kills some penalties. He's basically a consistent, reasonable 50-point guy, which is what you're looking for from your second line center. He doesn't shoot much. He doesn't hit much. He doesn't score all that much, but he can set up plays. And he's not a small individual out there, so he takes up some good space. The age and the contract fit. I'm not as high on his ultimate upside as some people are. He's played a ton of top 6 minutes, even first line minutes in recent years too. But I think that is a better fit than a guy like William Karlsson for Vancouver. It's someone who's under contract and is younger. And maybe if it works out well, you can extend him into his 30s too. And it's more of a long-term fit. Geekie, 27, like you said, coming off a career year though, clicked at 22%. Like that's not going to be, replicable. So again, not great in the draw, doesn't kill penalties, not a perfect fit there. And you're probably going to have to pay more to get him in trade and in value on the contract too. So again, not a perfect fit, but we're always looking for guys. And PJ, you and I were talking last week, and I mentioned, what about like Nick Schmaltz out of Utah? Someone that hasn't really been brought up. He's 29, he makes $5 million. He's only got one more year left. Does Utah go out and get themselves another center that they're like, okay, now we've got Cooley and this guy, is it James Haggins, is it Brady Martin, whatever, long term, is a guy like Nick Schmaltz expendable? He's a consistent 60-point guy, a real playmaker, offensive, can play some decent defense too. I have no idea if he's available. But I'm just trying to look outside the box for some options here.
Well, and part of the reason you brought him up was a spitballing, because we're trying to think, okay, if you're going to trade Thatcher Demko, where does he end up? And certainly Utah is a team that could probably use a goalie like Demko, assuming he's healthy. It was an interesting spitball, and certainly an interesting name, because it's in that range of the kind of number two they'd ideally like, the guy with a bit of size, bit of strength, bit of skill. Because I agree with your assessment on Zacha, like guy that, he shows up and he's around. He's clearly an NHL centerman, but he doesn't move the meter for you. It was, I remember it was Jim Benning was chasing after him, if I remember correctly. And it felt like a very sort of Jim Benning kind of move. It was like, why do you love this guy so much? Like, I guess you saw him once, he must have played a great, but like the overall there is it's just not convincing to me as a guy that if you're really serious about trying to push your chips and moving your first round pick, as it sounds like they want to do, It doesn't feel like the kind of move. It feels like there's a better move to be had. And you're right. Schmaltz would be a much bigger move. Now, is he available? We don't know. But that's the kind of guy.
But they're looking for goaltending. And you're talking about two players in the final years of their contract. He's a right shot center too, Schmaltz, we should add. You're talking about two players in the final years of their contract before unrestricted free agency. The money almost matches up perfectly. They're just $850K apart, and Schmaltz has a 10-team no-trade list, so don't know if Vancouver's on that. What do you think, Cam? The makings of a Schmaltz-Demko deal there?
Well, that's what I mean, right? Like, that's why I was just trying to find ideas that could make sense. Like, I'm not even on team move Demko, to be honest with you, unless they feel like they can't retain him past this, or they're like, injuries are going to be an issue forever here. But if you are looking down that road, then I think that would be a nice trade up rather than going like 15th overall and Lekiramaki or Vland or something like that and mortgaging some of your future, taking an asset off the roster right now that you have some depth in. You don't really want to lose Silovs for nothing on waivers or something like that in September. So it could fit. It could be a fit for both clubs.
Lastly, this guy dropped something in our pipe last week about Bowen Byram interest with the Vancouver Canucks, and Blake and I are like, boy, defense looks pretty good already. But Patrick brought up that the notion would be, if you're worried about losing Quinn Hughes, then you have another top four left side guy who's good with the puck. And then secondly, the whole notion of maybe just go out and try and win with the best defense core you could possibly assemble for next season and hope that they help you generate offense. What do you think of that philosophy?
I'm not completely against it. I've always liked Bo Byram. He's obviously a good player. He's a player who's been consistently looking for more. In Colorado, in Buffalo, he wants more responsibility. He wants more money. He wants more everything. I think it would fit in a vacuum for Vancouver in that regard, is that they could give him more, but it's like the left side is pretty jacked up on Vancouver already. Right. So it's like, and so now obviously it's Pettersson who's back to the AHL, and like the fact that they didn't even paper him down for this run, which I, again, continue to think that was strange to not give him that experience. Because if he has to go play in the American League next year, it seems silly, but so it doesn't fit in their depth chart. But I do like that thinking, PJ, is that if you're going to lose Quinn, then you're like, hey, well, maybe we still have a top pairing left side D here in the pipeline, not even in the pipeline, just waiting in the wings, and it kind of pushes everybody back down. So yes, but the price to acquire him isn't going to be cheap to get Byron. And so they have holes that need to be filled, that they need to use their assets for. Vancouver doesn't have many assets to trade to get good players. So if you're going to use some of those to get another left shot D when you have one center, that'd be bold.
The one thing I've learned in this interview is that you guys talk offline. In fact,
believe it or not,
it's amazing the network that Patrick has that he speaks to on a daily. I'm forever
go look
amazed at the you always come in. I was talking to so and so. I was talking to so and so. I was talking, and now I know that Cam Robinson is on that.
Well,
list.
if you read,
it's a collab I can get behind.
You got to read more of my stories, because elite prospects Cam Robinson says appears very often.
Really,
very, very often.
Love to
Cam Robinson. You may have heard is an essential source in this industry.
Just quickly, any other scuttlebutt you picked up at the combine that raised your eyebrows?
Well, I've been talking about Brady Martin is like, we talk about helium on this show. This kid's got a lot of juice. I will throw out this little tidbit too, is that, so Utah took him out to dinner. They loved him. Everybody loved him. He was the belle of the ball this week. And he's that smash mouth throwback player, great in front of the camera, great in the interviews, farm boy strength, got all that stuff going for him. But I did have it, and because I put it out there, is that Utah really likes him, and they could take him at 4. But I did have someone put a bug in my ear there last night to be like, watch out for a little bit of the smoke, because I'd also heard that Utah was open to moving that 4th overall pick. And I'd heard that a couple weeks ago too, is that they might be, inflating how much they love Brady Martin. So teams that are picking 5, 6, 7 that were hoping he was going to be there might be further inclined to jump up and be like, we want that 4th overall pick so we can get our guy, which is, I love that big brain thought if Bill Armstrong is pulling that off in Utah too. So it's something to watch.
Billy Armstrong.
Yeah, well,
go.
The weeks before the NFL draft, they call it lying season for a reason. Anyways, a few weeks until the draft, Cam will be riding with us weekly until then, and then from the draft floor, sadly no GMs, but then from the draft floor,
I'll be there.
Look for exactly. Yeah. We have you. That's important. Thank you, sir. Until next week.
Okay, take care, boys.
Carson Price from the historic Wall Center, and this next segment brought to you by the Arnold Palmer designed Whistler Golf Club, now open for the 2025 season. The Bears may even tend the flag for you. Check out their socials at Whistler Golf. There's been lots of Bear activity up there this year, and Arnold Palmer designed, right, as we head to the U.S. Open at Oakmont, really where Arnold Palmer brought the game of golf to the masses from the country clubs. A reminder, tee times can be booked for any time during the 2025 season online right now. Get those locked in. And if you have a group of 12 or more, ask about the Carson Price midweek special. If you can bring that group Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Al Chris Manson and his fantastic team up the Whistler Golf Club going to take good care of you. Go to whistlergolf.com/groups. Did you know that we have the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, join this program weekly?
I do. I've heard this before.
Yes, he is the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. His podcast, 100% Hockey with Darren Millard, 3 times weekly. Mr. John Shannon joins us. How are you?
Well, I'm not very happy because I just got a call before we went on the air from Bob Nicholson. And Bob was in his truck going down Highway 97 to Fairview Mountain without me.
Oh, boy.
So I am not happy today.
No.
Period. And I may be from Oliver, British Columbia, but my golf clubs aren't there right now.
Yes, and of course, Bob from Penticton, British Columbia. So, hey, I watched the first 2 games of the Stanley Cup Final enraptured, John. Yep. I thought it was some of the best NHL hockey we had seen in some time. We have been accustomed to the playoffs sort of losing a little bit of their quality as they go on because of the attrition rate, but for the most part, all the best players were present and accounted for and gotten through whatever ailments were bothering them. And I started even vocalizing to friends and texting, boy, this brings me back to my childhood. Yeah. Islanders, Oilers, unquestionably the 2 best teams in hockey with a Stanley Cup Finals history. Boy, this is going to be outstanding. As a neutral, I'm hooked.
And then last night.
Exactly. Oh, boy. John.
And then last night. And
oh, what a downer. I was so stoked for that game.
I turned it off.
Well, I stuck with it now. I was at 2-0. I started flicking around.
I don't know how you can turn a car crash off, Patrick.
It was beautiful outside, John. I could go outside.
It was so gorgeous
sit
here.
in the sun.
You know, at 2-0, I was flicking around because the Blue Jays game was pretty enthralling as well. And then I started the third period going, and maybe it was just a pep talk to myself because, like, I'm just looking for great games. Hey, 4-1, this game ain't over. There's a glimmer. That's a fantastic offensive hockey team in Edmonton. Maybe they'll get their stuff together and we get a fantastic finish.
No.
And it got worse, John.
Car crash.
It got worse.
Pure and unadulterated car crash.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, this is the side of the Florida Panthers we see every once in a while, that they can make people play this way. They can poke the bear enough. That's my tribute to the Arnold Palmer golf courses up at Whistler. They can poke the bear enough to get everybody off their game. Evander Kane was off his game from the opening faceoff. They did a magnificent job against Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Give Anton Lundell a great deal of credit, in addition to Barkov and Seth Jones on the blue line. Quite frankly, the Oilers were never in it.
No.
They were never in the game. And you have to think and hope that from that perspective of the neutral observer, that we get a little bit of a reset from the Oilers, which we've seen this year from them a few times.
Yes.
That they can play a better game on Thursday night. It will. I know Connor McDavid a little bit. I would not want to be within 50 feet of him today. He will be absolutely cantankerous about what happened last night and how they were embarrassed.
From a viewing perspective, I mean, is it just you got to lean back into McDavid, and if you're trying to tell this story from a broadcaster standpoint, I mean, what are you leaning on here? It's like you said, they hyped up the Kane, skating for 240 or whatever it was before the game and hyping himself up, and then of course he turns into a turd. So do you just go back to leaning on McDavid as you're trying to tell this story and try to get people enticed and get them back in watching?
Well, I think there's a few storylines from an Oiler perspective that will get people to at least tune in at 5 o'clock for 6 or 8 minutes. First of all, who you're starting in goal is going to be one of the key questions. My bet is Stuart Skinner. But you guys saw it firsthand last season that Calvin Pickard came in at the right time. He came in at the right time in the LA series earlier this year. The other one is that there has to be more from that second tier of Oiler forwards. The story about leaning in on Connor and Leon, Patrick, is more a case of what has Florida done? Yeah. Why are they not near as effective in games 2 and 3 particularly than they were in game 1 or the previous playoff series? And that's what the Florida Panthers do. The other aspect of it is that Brad Marchand was on the number 1 line in Boston for a decade. And now to have him on the third line and his experience and depth and his skill speaks volumes to where the Florida Panthers are. And maybe we are watching a team that is on the verge of being a post-salary cap dynasty.
Yeah. Brings us to our Toyota Pacific Dealers poll question. Brad Marchand, how do you regard him, John? A rat, a playoff hero, or a bit of both?
Well, the answer is yes. So the answer is a bit of both. But he's the perfect player. He's the perfect player. He's Alex Burrows with a ring, is what he is. And listen, what he's also done at 37 years of age is told the hockey world, you know what? Come and get me. Give me 2 more years. Maybe I can play that game for a team that needs someone like that. Our old pal Brad Drilliving in Toronto talked about DNA. Does Brad Marchand have that DNA in him that would help the Maple Leafs get over the top? Does the DNA help the Vancouver Canucks with Brad Marchand? Wouldn't that be something? Brad Marchand ended up with the Canucks.
I thought that this morning. I went, oh my God, could you imagine?
Shannon, Alex Burrows with a ring. You may lose your BC privileges here, sir, if you keep that up. Are you going to call Premier EB or shall I, Patrick? That lands so hard.
I used to know a few politicians. Bill Barasoff was a high school friend. He was the Speaker of the House, but that's about it, okay?
I got to say, forever I had no time for Brad Marchand. Didn't dispute that he was a good hockey player, but just the lows and the cheap plays, like the low bridge on Sammy Salo in that game against Boston, amongst the most cowardly plays that I've ever seen in any sport. But I'll be damned, John, the more I watch him now, and the more I listen to him now, too, because I always thought he was a pretty good interview and had something to say, but I almost feel like now he's sort of slipping into NHL senior statesman. Like with some of the things he said about the tax-free jurisdictions earlier this week, like I gotta say I'm warming up to him a little bit, and also in part because you don't see all the cheap shit that you used to, or at least not as much of it on a game-to-game basis.
And let's face it, I think there's somebody on the other side that a lot of people have warmed up to, and that's Corey Perry. With everything that Corey Perry did as an Anaheim Duck along the way, or the multitude of other teams he played for, I'd shudder to think where the Oilers are in these playoffs without Corey Perry, particularly with an injured Zach Hyman. Perry's done his job at 40 years old, and he's already told everybody he's going to play next year.
I know, and I said it on yesterday's show. I was mayor of Wrongville on him. I thought after the Chicago incident, whatever happened there, that we had basically seen the last of Corey Perry, that he was washed and there was no there, but he's found the perfect spot.
Well, it's as an aside.
He's playing his role.
As an aside, he dearly wanted to play in Toronto. And Kyle Dubas was the manager at the time and elected not to sign him. He ended up playing in Montreal. And how many teams ago was that now? That he's been a factor for teams. And in many ways, Corey Perry's the type of player that, quite honestly, could help any team at this point. Give Kenny Holland some credit. He took heat for signing him. And another guy from the Okanagan, but he took heat for signing him. He took heat for signing a few guys, and they seem to have worked out all right for Edmonton.
We're touching them all here. Yeah. Shannon from Oliver, for Living, and Nicholson from Penticton, and Holland from Vernon. Go ahead.
John, if we can dial back to, you mentioned Stuart Skinner. I mean, here's a guy that struggled, especially at breakaways. But, I don't think he necessarily changes the story, but the goalies continue to be a story in Edmonton. Do you think, zooming ahead to the summer, that there is going to be, first of all, an Edmonton thought about what to do there, but in general, do you think there is, again, a lesson for teams to consider in what having a goalie, whether you need to pay your goalie, whether that all matters, where they're at with their thinking on goalies?
Well, that's interesting because, this is now Stan Bowman's problem.
Yeah.
He lived the life in Chicago of Antti Niemi winning a cup for him and Corey Crawford winning 2 cups for him. He has no loyalty, and I say this pragmatically and without malice. He has no loyalty to Stuart Skinner like the previous administration did. Right. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's a rethinking of what Skinner is. But at the same time, if you look at Skinner in the Vegas series, if you look at Skinner in the Dallas series, and you look at Skinner for most of the playoffs last season, he has done the job.
Yeah.
The problem, Patrick, is, and there's lots of goalies in the league like this, when he looks bad, he looks horrendous. There's no in between there. But it's one of those ones, and you're right about breakaways. He almost, and I've never played the position, but he almost looks too aggressive. If you listen to guys like Henrik Lundqvist, who loved sitting on the blue line, sitting on the goal line, you wonder if it would be better if Skinner sat back on the goal line, because he's a great athlete. He's got great reactions, but he tends to be so aggressive at times. Got him in trouble in the Dallas series once in I think game 2, and it was I think it got him in trouble last night on a couple of those breakaways.
When the game devolves like it did last night in the third period, John, and the most penalty minutes in a Stanley Cup Finals game since Calgary, Montreal in '86, like damn near 4 years.
I did that game too.
Oh, I remember that series vividly. Does the league like that? Like, do they view it as
I think
the scoreboard's out of hand, so it's arresting television and it may hook the viewer? Does the league like that stuff? Is there any shame there whatsoever? Or do they just like the fact that there's activity, action, something that's going to make you stop for a second and watch?
I think that you could probably slice that any way you want, Matt. I'm sure that there are people in the office that are saying, well, we don't need that. I think there are other people saying, hey, that's hockey. They're prepping for game 4. At a certain point, the league can't control everything. And the league has to live with consequences. And some will think that the consequences are fine. And some will, think that, that's not helping us sell the game to new fans. But unlike Patrick, I think a lot of people did hang around and watch it and wanted to see that. Was there going to be another car crash? Sure. And there was another car crash and another car crash and another car crash last night. But I don't think the league sits around and says, okay, we've got controlled mayhem. Isn't that a good thing? Or we've got controlled mayhem, and by the way, we got to fix that. I think that they live with the reality of what professional hockey is at this point and move on with it.
What about Walman squirting the other bench?
Oh,
the infant, the juvenile stuff.
Henrik Lundqvist got a fine for doing that. So, I would not be surprised if there's an issue of a fine, but are you serious when we're talking about
people, just don't squirt water at them?
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about guys getting clipped with sticks. We're getting guys with massive slashes, and now we're worried about water on the bench.
Water. Wow.
I'll just have you.
Seth Jones was ballistic about it.
Guys, I will have you know that squirting an opponent with a water ball after a game is a 3-game suspension in the adult safe hockey.
Oh my
league.
God!
Didn't happen to me, but happened to my buddy Dal.
Hey, and where are you with all your broadcasting? Boucher was upset about it. And I don't blame him. That's probably an expensive suit. Do you like the guy between benches in the Cup final?
I like 3 broadcasters in the Cup final.
So
when you and there's a simple I'm not for it all the time, but when you have a series where you have the same 2 teams playing for 4, 5, 6, 7 times, But I feel for Craig Simpson at times, because I don't know by the time we get to Game 4 what more can be said. I always teach people you have to find 6 different ways to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Craig's in double digits now. So.
Yeah, and the other, I'm so with you on 3-man booth for the Cup final, because it distinguishes the Cup final from other series. I also love, especially when it's a good broadcaster like Ray Ferraro, who's down between the benches, because they bring you a perspective that you just don't get from up high. And needless to say, you're going to have insight on a series from working that spot that I just don't think you get from up top. I would love to see Rogers adopt that model going forward for the Cup final. Let it be Ray.
I'm sure it's. I'm sure it can be discussed at a certain point. I mean, let's face it. I think Ray has elevated his game to a level that is better than anybody else in the National Hockey League right now.
Yeah,
and that's not to say that the others aren't good, but Ray to me is at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, in fact, I'm not sure there has been a better TV analyst with hockey.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I think he's. If you stuck Ray up in the booth, I don't think he'd be near as effective.
No.
Well, he does the booth sometimes with Shorty, and it's great. But between benches, he absolutely shines.
I think the key with him is the way I've always appreciated that he's a guy who played the game. He knows that innately, but his ability to translate that into terms that I think non-players, like general fans, can understand. And to the point of him being between the benches, he can pick out on things that others might not. He's just very good at it. He just picks out stuff that you might not pick out yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Your point about Ray and his terminology is his strength, because he can talk to anybody. He's not overly technical, and he can put it in terms that everybody can understand. Not everybody has played the game of hockey. Not everybody understands the strategy of hockey, but Ray can put it in terms that the layman can understand, the 10-year-old can understand, the grandmother and grandfather can understand.
That's it. He serves all audiences. He's got a great vocabulary. He understands, whom he is speaking to, that the audience matters most, not the sort of inside hockey guys. The other thing is, much like Bob Cole and a lot of the great play-by-play guys, he's got an anticipation about him too. Like, he rises as the moments rise in the game. And then the one thing that Ray does that I don't hear a lot of analysts do is, like, he'll break down a replay, and again, the energy will build to the and then he'll throw it to break. So, like, it's the full broadcasting meal deal.
That's an ESPN philosophy. ESPN has their analysts throw the commercial breaks because it gives them another chance to stick another replay in, rather than just having a close-up or a crowd shot. It allows them to do some analysis for that last 10 seconds before they go to commercial. The fascination with Ray in that position, though, is there's actually probably about a third of the ice he doesn't see.
Right.
Because he doesn't see the near left and the near right corner. So then he has to rely on his production team, and he has to rely on Sean McDonough to carry him through that. And that's the one thing he would say, is that every once in a while he needs a little bit of help with those near corners where like head coaches, they don't see a thing.
Right. All the more reason for the three-man
Yeah.
booth, though, right? With somebody up high who can fill in that gap.
Correct.
Okay. Lastly, Shannon, we can't let you get out of here without asking you a Canucks question, but Rutherford and Allvin were conspicuously absent at the scouting combine in Buffalo. Do you think they already have a deal to send that 15th overall pick out? What are you hearing on the Canucks?
No, I don't think anything imminent. And by the way, I would never expect Jimmy to go to a combine again. I mean, how many combines does a guy need to go to?
Yeah.
And seriously, I mean, how many?
Well, Allvin, though, and like the other thing, John, is like, this is where you get to talk to the agents.
How many junior games, how many college games, how many European games has Patrick seen? I mean, at some point, you hire scouts and you hire a player personnel department. Ryan Johnson and all those guys and whoever else.
Cammy was there. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's their job. And one of the key things I find really kind of humorous at times is people say, well, we should delegate more. We've got to delegate responsibility more. And then when something doesn't happen, why weren't they there? But you know what? You can't have it both ways. You just can't have it both ways.
Mm-hmm. John Shannon delegating his tea time at Fairview today to Bob Nicholson to join us. Thank you, sir, for this. Until next week.
Cheers, boys.
See you, John.
Kalrsson Price from the historic Wall Center. Extend your game night with a staycation in downtown Vancouver. Book an exclusive Kalrsson Price right here at the Wall. Call 604-331-1000. Tell them we sent you some blackout date supply based on availability. Well, Patrick is in today because his Nibs is in Toronto calling the Canada-Ivory Coast match tonight from BMO Field, an international soccer friendly part of this Canadian Shield tournament that they've mocked up in advance of the Gold Cup. Of course, Canada with a big victory over Ukraine on Saturday. They scored early, they scored often, and they scored via guys named David. Jonathan David and Promise David. Accounting for the first three goals. And Jesse Marsh says that veteran striker Kyle Larin will circle in tonight. He'll captain the side, actually. We think that Promise David will be in the squad, but no indication yet whether he'll play or not. And it might just be that they're resting Jonathan David after a couple of goal performance. Did you see the send-off he got from Lille in the final game? Like, that was...
That's local hero stuff.
Oh, my God. Yeah. A whole stadium of people chanting his name and thank you, to show what kind of a mark he has made on international football. I mean, we haven't seen much of that with a Canadian soccer player over the years, and he's, of course, being targeted by a lot of the big clubs around the league. So, fantastic development for Canadian soccer, and Blake continues to argue he's their best player, not Alphonso Davies.
I think he is.
Yeah.
I buy that.
I saw ESPN did a ranking of the best soccer players at every position, and I want to say Jonathan David came in at 14th amongst forwards or strikers. Right. Alphonso Davies was something like 5th amongst fullbacks. Whitecaps getting offers on Pedro Vite, and this was to be completely expected. I mean, Pedro Vite has played so well this year. There's talk about him as MLS MVP. Axel Schuster joined us on Friday and said, look, we're not shopping anybody, but when you play well and your players gain notoriety, and particularly advancement in the CONCACAF Champions Cup as well, other teams will come a-calling. And so the rumor here, as per Glass City, is that Benfica, the big Portuguese club, has offered 3 million euros for Vite that Vancouver doesn't want to sell, is hoping to get Vite back on a $2 million per season contract. That would make him a designated player and change a bit of the makeup of the Caps. And in fact, Glass City's going through the European reports and says selling Vite to Benfica might be a prelude to buying this midfielder Dominic Fitz from SK Austria Wien, a 25-year-old Austrian who has been targeted. We have heard his name associated with the Whitecaps going back to earlier this year. So perhaps some big moves coming here from first place
I had a
Whitecaps.
similar conversation to you guys, I guess, with Axel last week. I mean, obviously, first talking about where they were at health-wise.
Yeah, well,
And by the way, they canceled practice today. Actually, they're still, I guess, feeling sort of the after effects of all of it. So, and I mean,
they earned it after a 3-0 win.
yeah, and I mean, I suppose also if you think about, it, I mean, they played so much football the last. However, 6 weeks, month, 2 months, go on, but
Whatever plan Jesper Sorensen came into with, you almost have to throw out, given the totality of matches that they have played so far this year. At least it calms down a little bit now, but of course you're into Wednesday matches on the MLS schedule.
But
they're in Columbus this weekend, home a week from tomorrow for San Diego. In
2 weeks.
2 weeks, sorry.
June 25th.
In what could be a 1 versus 2.
Yes.
We've already seen some of that as Vancouver has played Minnesota, who's near the top of the table in the West. San Diego's right there in second place as we speak right now.
But Vite, I mean, I asked him, I said, listen, this guy's incredible. How do you sustain things when you have to deal with the reality of some of these guys going? And he said, well, in the end, that's on me. I have to keep finding new guys. If in the end that's where it goes, he's done a good. I mean, Axel's job has done a very good job. It's very sensational job.
Yep.
To have your coach step in with essentially the same squad, a few obviously little tweaks here and there, but essentially the same squad. And you found the coach who just needed to take this group to the next spot, and has done that immaculately.
No, I know, and it was a big gamble letting Vanni Sartini go.
Yeah.
He was so beloved by the fans here. Was a face of the franchise for them. Yes, 2 weeks from tomorrow, home to San Diego at BC Place. Tickets, whitecapsfc.com. Nathan Rourke has been named the CFL Offensive Player of the Week, according to the Pro Football Focus Honor Roll. Gary Peters and Mitchell Betts on defense also getting some shine in that honor roll. Lions bringing back running back Jordan Terrell. He played 3 games last year, had 4 carries and a long touchdown catch against the Argonauts. Short week for the Leos, a turnaround to Thursday, a Thursday game in Winnipeg after playing the late Saturday game. That's the bad news. The good news is, we mentioned this when the Lions schedule came out, it's one of only 2 short weeks all year.
That's good.
And it's the shortest. They have a 6-day turnaround, July 13th, 19th for the games at Edmonton and then home here to Saskatchewan. But by midsummer, early part of the season, they are done with the short weeks, and they either have bye weeks or they have the full 7 days between games. That should bode well. They did dress 6 first-year CFL players Saturday, and they get just 1 full practice. Like today is their 1 full practice because you got a walkthrough and travel day to Winnipeg tomorrow. So I hope all the young guys, first-year CFL guys, really paid attention during preseason and training camp to the practices because they're not going to have much of a prep session this week.
What did you make of this, the flow of the game, the way they found their way in the second half?
Yeah, well, I got to say the first half had me a little discouraged and had me thinking, oh, man, like, are we looking at the same thing that we saw last year where the Lions were just too frustrating, especially with when Nathan Rourke was at quarterback. But needless to say, they found their game.
Yeah.
And ran the ball effectively. Rourke had a big day, played pretty good defense. I mean, all in all, given that the first half was a whole lot of, nothing, it winds up being a game where I think you feel pretty good about all 3 phases, or maybe not the short yardage. But
the thing, I mean, I think a lot about what he said, Rourke said last year, coming back and having to sort of readjust himself to the sort of the timing of everything, the space,
for sure, and a new offense,
and
too,
a new offense. And then, but to me, what stood out the most was the confidence he showed running the ball. Those moments that come, I've got to spring now. And seeing the gap and recognizing how the gap's going to play out in the wider field, the way the defenses are set up differently. Like it just spoke. Okay, he's got it back. He's clicking. He sees the field in the way he needs to see
that
it.
Up the middle scramble where he broke a couple of ankle tackles.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
for sure. BC Place has released a statement with regards to the long wait times getting into Saturday's game. Of course, the pregame concert with Snoop Dogg, 52,000 there. I will read, whenever attending a large sold-out event, we recommend people arrive as early as possible. At Saturday's game, we received a large influx of people approximately 30 minutes before the advertised start time for the Snoop Dogg pregame concert. While our teams work hard to get fans safely into the building and as efficiently as possible, there were wait times at certain gates that averaged 10 to 20 minutes. By the time Snoop Dogg went on stage, 95% of attendees were in the building. As we do receive high volumes of fans arriving through Terry Fox Plaza, we encourage fans to use gates around the building to avoid congestion points. We understand that lineups can be frustrating. Thank fans for their understanding and patience. Yes, big lesson. If you're going to a sizable event at BC Place, use those gates around the side of the stadium. They tend to be a lot freer and less busy than Terry Fox Plaza. The two gates by Terry Fox Plaza tend to have enormous crowds around them. And I think it's also on BC Place to have people outside there directing people to those gates because that would be helpful.
The bottleneck that you get there is bad. I was at the Inter Miami game. There were 50,000 people for that, and in the stands. And my buddies and I, we end up coming around the backs because we always generally come over from Olympic Village anyway. And we walk around the seawall, and I would say anybody who've ever shown up to a show like that or an event like that, go to the Plaza Nation side.
Absolutely, the gates off Pacific.
Those gates are always quick,
quicker than Terry Fox Plaza. And yesterday I said on the show, look, first time I've experienced this on television. I'd been to the 3 previous pregame concerts. I was a little concerned about the exodus. It looked more pronounced to me on TV than it did in the stands the previous 3 years. But I said, look, it could all be perspective. I invite people to tell me I'm wrong. And our friend Farhan Lalji did. Messaged me last night, showed me some video he had taken from the sidelines of the second half, where there was still a good number of people in the upper bowl. In fact, he said he talked to the stadium and they thought there was still in the order of like 38,000 people there for the start of the fourth quarter.
I mean, I found myself thinking about how crowds have been saved, like the rugby sevens, where they often have opened up upstairs, not the whole thing, but you still end up seeing lots of empty seats, even when there's a large crowd.
Yeah.
And there were the announced crowd, I think, for the Whitecaps on Sunday was 24,000, which was maybe bigger than it was, but it was still a pretty good crowd in the lower bowl. That lower bowl, if it's all full up to the top, is about 30,000. So, you will see a surprising number when that stadium is fully open. You will see a lot of empty seats, and it will still be a big crowd. So, Lions did well. They got a huge crowd in. They would have enjoyed a better first half.
Yeah.
Maybe more people would have stuck around.
I think the first half was, and in fact, this is a couple of times. There have been a couple of these pregame concerts where the Lions have been awesome in the first half and delivered, and there have been a couple where there's not a whole lot has happened in the first half. Harder to keep the attention on what, as we say, it turns into a long day because you're getting there early, you're waiting to get in line in the stadium, the show goes on, and then so it's a big time commitment. Vancouver Canadians start a critical 6-game homestand tonight at Nat Bailey Stadium versus Spokane. These two teams are tied for second place in the Northwest League, 1 game behind Hillsborough, who leads. If you're not familiar, the team that wins the first half of the season in the Northwest League gets a bid to the championship series with home field advantage. There are 9 games left here in the first half, so this 6-game homestand and then the first 3 games of a 6-game roadie. The Seas go on after this week. Infielder Nick Goodwin named the Northwest League Player of the Week. 9 for 21 with 5 home runs, including some big ones late in the game to help the Seas come back. 5 runs scored, 12 RBI, some super clutch hitting from Goodwin. Good on him. Sadly for us here, selfishly, Trey Savage, the number 1 Blue Jays pitching prospect, number 2 overall, was called up to Double-A yesterday after just 4 starts with the Canadians, just 1 in Nat Bailey Stadium. It was pretty clear this former first-round pick was too advanced for A-ball. He could even be, I was watching the game last night, and Joe Siddle was talking about he could even be an option for the Blue Jays later this year. He is that far advanced. He leads all of minor league baseball with 88 strikeouts in just 51 innings. Jays number 9 prospect Cal Steven pitches tonight. We're going to be at the ball game, as a matter of fact. Yeah, it's going to be good fun. You take your pooch to the park tonight. Yes, the first dog day of summer at Nat Bailey. Wednesday, Thursday night games, then matinees Friday through Sunday. Get your tickets 604-872-5232 or CanadiansBaseball.com. Patrick, we had a revolutionary moment in Vancouver sports last night. A Vancouver hockey team had a first pick in the draft.
Vancouver team, period.
The PWHL Vancouver franchise, still unnamed, was awarded the first pick in the expansion draft with their cousin Seattle and began the selections. They took 7 players overall. Of course, they had signed a bunch of players. We were in a week-long signing window. And GM Kara Gardner-Morey is building this team from the goaltender out. They had prioritized goaltending and puck-moving defensemen in the signing period. And through this draft, they will now shop for scoring forwards in free agency as she rounds out this roster. And they have been tied to Hannah Miller, a Canadian and Chinese international who played last year for the Toronto Scepters. So we are in short order here going to have a full team. And then we need a team name.
I can't wait for the name. I'm very excited.
There are pretty good names in this
Yeah,
loop.
that's what I mean.
And there's some pretty good logos in this loop as well. Like
they've done well.
I know everybody says the Toronto Scepters thing is too close to the Taylor Swift logo, but the name and the logo I think are quite.
Every time I look at it, I'm like, I like this look. They've done well. I think the whole package. Obviously, they took their time getting it right, and they've got it right.
The NBA Finals, one game apiece here, Oklahoma City and Indiana. It faced criticism in Game 1 for no on-court marks, indicating that this is the championship series. There was a time yesteryear where either NBA Finals or the Larry O'Brien Trophy was on the floor. Well, ESPN superimposed the trophy onto the court for Game 2 for the television audience. This is also an issue, or at least being talked about during the Stanley Cup Final. Same. You used to have Stanley Cup Final written in script on the ice, right? You don't have that anymore. The culprit here, sponsor space. They want to sell that space. And so they have made the sacrifice of not having an indication for all to see that this is your championship series. You know what they need to do? Bunting.
There we go. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Just find somewhere to put bunting. Baseball's been around for a century and a half, and if you see bunting, you know it's a big game.
Deal. Yeah. Love it.
And lastly here today, UFC coming back to Vancouver. A UFC Fight Night, October 18th at Rogers Arena. Tickets going to go on sale in August. Results of the Toyota Pacific Dealers poll question from Monday asked you, did the Canucks make a mistake in not promoting Manny Malhotra to head coach? 65% of you said yes. What do you think, Patrick? Is it getting a little uncomfortable under the collar for Canucks management, knowing they bypassed a guy who could well win a Calder Cup for a also inexperienced first-time NHL head coach?
I mean, I wrote this last week. Will they rue this decision even before they'd made the Calder Cup final? I mean, wouldn't it be something? Dallas Stars need a head coach. Wouldn't it be something if?
Well,
I'm not saying that's going to happen.
It is a big leap from one year on an AHL as an AHL head coach to coaching a team that intends to vie and win a Stanley Cup championship next year.
Yeah.
I was listening to Halford and Bruff this morning. They had a Dallas guest on who did bring up Manny's name, which surprised me. Will Jim Nill, and look, they've had a lot of sort of name coaches in Dallas. Will Jim Nill go down the road of a younger Spencer Carberry type for that bench, knowing that you've got to get over the hump? The Western Conference Final has been your Waterloo here.
Carberry is such an interesting comparison because, he coached 3 seasons in the A. He had a long stint in the East Coast League, though. Right, like he was a head coach in South Carolina for 6 or 5 seasons.
Wow,
coached in Saginaw. Like he had a lot of experience, so he knows the role. Clearly, Manny was ready for the role. We've seen that. That's the conclusion of this year. He was ready to be the boss. Mm-hmm. How much more time do you need to be the boss to be successful in the NHL? I'm not sure.
Well, it's funny because I had often had this conversation with Wally Buono, who used to talk about appropriate apprenticeships, right? You should spend a few years as a position coach, then as a coordinator before you're ready to be a head coach. And what I always said to Wally was, Wally, I don't dispute that in the least, but what about you? Like, you were in the league for like a minute or two, and the next thing you know, you were a head coach, and the next thing you know, you were a record-setting head coach. And the answer here, I think, Patrick, is that some are just natural-born leaders.
Yep.
Some are just wired to do that job, and that often shows itself early. And I do wonder if that's what we're looking at with Manny Malhotra. Like, remembering him as a player here, the leadership qualities, and just easy leadership qualities too, right? Like, he wasn't out there trying to be a rah-rah guy, follow me. It's just guys gravitated to him organically. Like, even veteran players would seek out his counsel. So I do wonder if they have one of those guys in their auspices, and how nervous they would be about Dallas or someone else coming to swipe him away.
It's good for Manny. I mean, it's a credit to him for figuring this out. He's definitely marched to his own band in his own way and gotten to where he is now a hot prospect as an NHL head coach.
Canucks girl said, no, he is not ready. Okay. No Nux Given says, absolutely, not hiring him is stupid. So there you go. The full spectrum. Neil, why bring Manny into this tire fire? It's likely going to fail. Quinn will leave, then fire Foot, bring Manny in and build a new team. With the inexperience on the Canucks bench right now, it looks like a temporary solution. Colton, you need to keep a winning mentality and some normalcy in the AHL. They made a mistake not getting a proven coach. And then Matitude says, my initial thought at the time was that it was a mistake, but now I'm not as convinced. Also, not seeing much mention of how Manny could be in the NHL and not mess with the flow of the current AHL run. I assume that played a part as well. Well, fair enough, but your NHL head coach is more important than your AHL team postseason run.
And
he interviewed, right?
Yeah. So, and even if you were announced, like, at a certain level, that would be motivating for the team. Like, hey, guys, this is Manny's last run with us.
Right.
Let's go.
A chance to impress the NHL head coach.
I think most people would be like that. I don't think guys would be like, oh, Manny's leaving after this season. I'm going to play not very. Like, no, come on.
Errors and omissions from yesterday's program. And we erred in that, in fact, good friend and longtime audience member Geekie did send us a note over the weekend about an error made. It was last week's program with Jeff Merrick. I said 25 years into the century, 25's Conn Smythe winners. Of course, we canceled the Stanley Cup in 04-05. So it's 24 Conn Smythe winners. Thank you for that, Geekie. And I told him I was putting him on this in absentia. Blake was gloating about a losing bet yesterday on the Bet365 segment. Mike, I need you to be on board with me on that one, all right? We cannot allow, there's enough gloats to begin with. You may remember that Safeway My NHL Picks segment where, oh, my God, every week, 4-1, 5-0, look at the great Blake. We can't have him gloat when he actually loses the bet. And then lastly, I'm going to crowdsource this a little bit. Reach out to the Lions. They weren't. Is there an interior gate to BC Place via the Park Casino? Can you enter the stadium? No, just that little outdoor prom. Okay.
Yeah.
Because we were also wondering about, different places where we can direct people when you have these massive crowds at BC.
You used to be able, you used to be able to walk around the whole way, but no, those doors you cannot walk in that back way.
Well, there's a little exterior gate there.
Yeah, but it doesn't
on the
go
west side.
In.
Yeah, exactly.
No, there's no direct.
Okay, I was wondering whether there was
entrance.
one upstairs as well, whether you can just go through the casino and into the stadium, but alas, no. Okay, good to know. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with the program. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. Excuse me, X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us telling you about. Thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Always
Catch up next week.
Good fun.
And keep it local.